So unfortunately, we live in a day and age whereby there's a lot of misinformation spread. And that is especially true when it comes to fitness, dieting, or the industry in general. There's a lot of bullshit that gets spread around, and there's a lot of myths that get discussed. And the thing is, when more myths are discussed, then they get shared even more. And the more a myth gets shared, the more people tend to believe it. Warning, if you're a kid, let's say you're under 8, under 10, and are watching this, I really recommend you skip, because I'm about to ruin your life. Okay, so now they're gone. Now, remember back in the day when we used to believe in Santa? And we believed it for so long that even when our friends who stopped believing in Santa told us that Santa isn't real, we refuse to believe it. It's only when we're given undeniable proof from an authority figure, such as our mum, or our dad, or our carer, or our guardian, or a teacher, or whatever, told us that Santa isn't real, that's only when we stop believing it. So why do you think myths get shared so much when authorities of the industry, people who have a lot of followers on Instagram, people who have apparent credentials of helping people lose weight, and they saying these myths, they're saying these things that aren't true, which ultimately leads people to believe them a little bit more because there's an authority saying it. So literally within the next couple of minutes, I'm about to try and debunk as many myths within the fitness industry and within dieting as possible. Are you ready? Myth number 1, carbohydrates cause fat gain. No, carbohydrates do not cause fat gain. The only thing that causes fat gain is by creating a caloric surplus, i.e. eating more calories relative to what you burn off. Carbohydrates are not independent of this, which means that if you are creating a caloric deficit and are eating nothing but carbohydrates, you are going to lose fat. If you create a calorie surplus and eat anything, not just carbohydrates, you will gain fat. The only reason why people think that carbohydrates gain fat is because, one, when you intake carbohydrates, you also retain a bit of water. For every gram of carbohydrate that gets stored in your body, you also retain between 3 to 4 grams of water. So if you cut carbohydrates completely from your diet, you will retain less water, meaning you will lose a lot of weight very, very fast. But that isn't fat, especially if you're not creating a calorie deficit. And the second reason as to why people think that carbohydrates cause you to gain weight is because when people look at carbohydrates, the typical thing they think of is such things as chocolate, bagels, etc., etc. And the thing with chocolate, bagels, cake, and all these examples is that they're actually more fat than they are carbohydrates, which means that the majority of the calories that they're made up of are from fat rather than carbohydrates, meaning that if you eat a lot of these, you're going to be potentially eating more calories than what it is that you're burning off, thus causing fat gain. But again, that's get down to the calories that you're intaking, not the carbohydrates. Secondly, seed oils are bad for you. This is quite a recent myth actually, and there's actually a cohort of research to suggest otherwise. In actual fact, there's a bunch of research done on seed oils which suggests that they are potentially healthier or better for you than any other oil, to be honest with you. Besides, the poison is in the portion. There's no such thing as something that's bad for you, with the exception arguably being alcohol. If you intake too much of anything, it could cause negative side effects. For example, if you drank too much water in such a small amount of time, you would get something called hyperhydrated, which in very simple terms means that your cells will start to burst. And we don't exactly try and dick on water every now and then, do we? Because we know the benefits of drinking a lot of water. Number 3, that you will get bulky and be a little bit too manly if you lift weights. Nope, that doesn't happen. Being scared of lifting weights because you don't want to be too muscly or too bulky is like being scared of cooking a 3-course meal because you do not want to turn into Gordon Ramsay. In order to get too big and too bulky, you need to specifically train and eat for that. You look at golden era bodybuilders such as Arnold Schwarzenegger or Ronnie Coleman. They're in that position where they are very, very big because they've dedicated years and years and years of hard work, training towards that point, eating towards that point, near perfect genetics, as well as a sprinkle of other substances. You are not going to get that big, you are not going to get that bulky if you just lift up a dumbbell, and if you do, I want to know your secret. That just doesn't happen. Number 4, insert this diet here allows you to lose weight without creating a calorie deficit. This is false because the only thing that causes fat loss is creating a calorie deficit. If you are losing fat, you're creating a calorie deficit. If you're not losing fat, you're not creating a calorie deficit. If a diet works, no matter how mental that diet may seem, whether it's reducing carbohydrates, whether that's a keto diet, whether that's intermittent fasting, whatever it is, it's helping you lose fat by forcing a calorie deficit upon you. Keto causes calorie deficit because it actually restricts you from eating a whole food group. Intermittent fasting causes you to create a calorie deficit by minimizing your eating window. The 5-2 diet causes a calorie deficit by reducing the amount of food that you're eating over 5 days and then allowing you to eat what you want over 2 days, thus meaning your overall weekly intake is in a deficit, hopefully. They're not special, they're not magic, they haven't got secret fat burning properties, they just have a calorie deficit at their core. And number 5, if you do this diet or if you do this exercise, you are going to burn fat more. Now, this one is a little bit of a trickier myth because technically they're correct. If you have a diet which eliminates carbohydrates completely, your body is actually going to be burning more fat for energy. But burning fat for energy is completely different to losing fat for fat loss. And it's the same with certain exercises. If you do cardio, your body is going to prioritize burning fat for energy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be losing fat. Burning fat and losing fat are two completely different things. The reason as to why is our bodies use all of our macronutrients to a certain extent to use for energy. It prioritizes carbohydrates, it uses fat as well, and then again, if it needs to, it can also use protein. It ideally doesn't want to, but it can still use protein for use of energy production. But what we found is that our bodies also have a neat little way of going back to homeostasis. So if you actually reduce your carbohydrates completely and your body actually prioritizes fat for energy, and as soon as you actually start intaking enough carbohydrates, our bodies will start prioritizing carbohydrates for use of energy instead and not really use much of the dietary fat that we need. But all in all, what you need to understand that fat burning is just using fat for energy. Losing body fat, losing adipose tissue will not occur unless you are eating less calories than what you're burning off. Think of it like a car. On one hand, you've got the car battery, making sure that the car is keeping going. And on the other hand, you've got the fuel inside the car, making sure that it's also going. They are two completely separate components of the car. Just because you're burning fuel doesn't mean you're using up the energy within the battery. Just because you're using the energy in the battery doesn't mean you're burning off the fuel. Look at that like burning fat and losing fat. They're two completely different things that people are getting confused about. You want to lose fat, create a calorie deficit, eat less calories than what you're burning off. It doesn't matter how much fat you're burning. If you are not creating a calorie deficit, you are not losing fat. So there's 5 myths that I've just helped debunk, and hopefully you understand that a little bit more. If you want any questions being answered regarding this, please make sure that you comment below because I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like because it helps me out a lot. And if you want to catch any more free fitness or fat loss based content without any of the bullshit, as always, make sure that you're either following my Instagram at k.p_health or subscribe to this channel. Peace.